What if the most profound lessons are hidden in silence? Follow Jesus through a quiet forest, where every step, though unseen, speaks volumes about love, strength, and the power of subtle actions. Will you listen closely enough to hear them? The disciples, tired from the demands of their daily lives and the constant questions they faced, gathered around Jesus, unsure of what to expect. There was a quiet sense of unease in the air. Jesus, as always, stood calm and composed, his eyes filled with warmth. Without saying much, he beckoned them to follow him on a walk through the nearby forest. It was an invitation that seemed simple enough, but one that stirred a sense of curiosity in each disciple. As they walked in silence, the sound of their footsteps on the soft earth was the only noise that filled the air. They noticed the trees stretching high above them, their branches interwoven to form a natural canopy. The forest was serene, the silence almost sacred. At first, the disciples were uncertain. What was the purpose of this quiet journey? But as the walk continued, they found themselves slowly surrendering to the peace around them, their minds beginning to quiet as well. The beauty of the forest, the soft murmur of a distant stream, the songs of unseen birds, began to soothe them. And though they walked in silence, they felt something stirring within them. The stillness itself began to teach them something deeper. The deeper they ventured into the forest, the more the disciples began to notice the subtle wonders around them. The way the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground, or the soft whisper of the wind as it moved through the leaves. As they turned a bend in the path, they came upon a small family of travelers, looking worn and weary. The parents appeared exhausted, their children frightened by the unknown. They had clearly been lost for days, their energy depleted. Jesus, without a word, knelt down and extended a hand, offering them food and water. He motioned for the children to come closer, giving them some small comfort with a warm smile. The disciples, standing quietly behind him, were struck by the simplicity of the act. There was no grand speech, no fanfare, just a quiet moment of human connection. It was in this silence, in the act of offering what little they had, that Jesus showed them the depth of compassion. The family, though no words were exchanged, felt the weight of Jesus' presence and his care for them. The disciples, moved by the scene, began to understand that sometimes the greatest gifts are the ones that go unnoticed, given not for recognition but out of pure love. That evening, as they sat around a campfire beneath the vast sky, the disciples waited for Jesus to speak. They knew that when he spoke, it was always with purpose, always with wisdom. But tonight he remained silent. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the whisper of the wind. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of quiet, Jesus began to speak. There was once a wind that blew through a small village, gentle and unseen. It passed by the villagers as they went about their daily tasks. Some noticed it, feeling its soft touch on their skin, while others paid it no mind. The wind never sought attention, never made a sound. Yet it was always at work, nourishing the earth, carrying seeds, shaping the landscape. It moved slowly with patience and purpose, not rushing to be heard. Though the villagers could not see it, they could feel its presence, and in time, they realized how much the wind had shaped their world. The disciples listened, each reflecting on the subtle message embedded within the story. Jesus continued, "Like the wind, your actions need not be loud or seen by all. Sometimes, it is the quietest gestures, the ones that seem insignificant, that leave the most lasting impact." The following morning, as they continued their journey, they stumbled upon a small injured animal lying by the side of the path. It looked helpless, its fur matted with blood, its body weak. The disciples recoiled slightly, unsure of what to do. But Jesus, without hesitation, knelt beside the creature. His touch was soft, gentle, and tender. With a quiet and steady hand, he cleaned its wounds and wrapped it in cloth, speaking no words but offering his calm presence. The disciples watched in silence, marveling at the simplicity of the act. There were no grand gestures, no declarations, just a quiet moment of compassion. Jesus, ever patient, allowed the animal to rest for a while before helping it to its feet, and with one final look, he let it go. The disciples felt a deep sense of peace in their hearts as they witnessed the unspoken connection between Jesus and the creature. It was in this quiet care, this unspoken understanding, that the disciples began to realize that true compassion did not require applause or recognition. It was found in the gentle, silent acts of love. Later that day, as the group continued through the forest, one of the disciples began to feel a surge of anger rising within him. He had been struggling with feelings of inadequacy, with doubts about his worth and place among the group. In an attempt to mask his pain, he snapped at the others, his words sharp and cutting. The other disciples looked on, unsure of how to respond. But Jesus, as always, remained calm, observing the situation with quiet eyes. Instead of rebuking the disciple, Jesus simply placed his hand on his shoulder and sat beside him in silence. For a long moment, no words were spoken. The disciples watched, puzzled by the quiet exchange, but slowly the troubled disciple began to open up. He shared his inner struggles, his feelings of failure, and the weight of his self-doubt. Jesus listened, offering no judgment, only the comfort of his presence. It was in this quiet moment, in the safe space created by Jesus' silence, that the disciple found relief. The burden of his anger and insecurity melted away, and he realized that sometimes healing comes not through words, but through the simple act of being heard. The day turned darker as a storm began to approach. The sky grew heavy with clouds and the wind picked up speed. The disciples, anxious at the thought of being caught in the storm, sought shelter beneath a large tree. The rain began to pour and the howling wind whipped through the forest. Yet Jesus remained calm, sitting beneath the tree with his eyes fixed on the horizon. The disciples, huddled together for warmth, kept glancing nervously at Jesus. "Why are you not afraid, Lord?" one of them finally asked. Jesus turned to them with a serene smile and replied, "The storm outside may rage, but it cannot touch the peace within." His voice was soft, but the wisdom in his words was profound. Jesus had found a peace that transcended the chaos of the world around him. It was not the absence of the storm that gave him peace, but his unwavering connection to the stillness within. The disciples, who had been caught up in the storm's intensity, now understood that true strength was not in fighting the chaos, but in maintaining peace despite it. It was in this moment of quiet that they began to grasp the deeper meaning of Jesus' words. As the group traveled deeper into the forest, they came to a peaceful glade, where Jesus stopped and motioned for them to sit. Without a word, he stepped away from them, walking to a quiet stream that ran through the glade. The disciples watched as Jesus knelt beside the water, his hands resting gently on his knees, his eyes closed in prayer. The silence around them felt sacred, as though time itself had slowed down. There were no dramatic gestures, no loud declarations, just a simple, heartfelt prayer. Jesus spoke no words aloud, but the disciples could feel the power of his connection to the divine. It was in this moment that they realized that prayer was not about the loudness of the words, but about the depth of the connection. It was a silent, intimate moment between the soul and the divine, one that needed no audience. The disciples, moved by the quiet strength of Jesus' prayer, felt their own spirits being uplifted. In the next village, a sickness had spread, leaving many bedridden and weak. As they entered the village, the disciples expected Jesus to perform a grand healing, a spectacle for all to see. But Jesus did not act in the way they expected. He approached each sick person with quiet compassion, laying a hand on their forehead, speaking words of comfort that no one else could hear. His touch was gentle, his presence calming. There was no shouting, no dramatic gestures, just quiet healing. The villagers, though at first confused by the simplicity of the act, soon found their strength returning. The disciples watched in awe, realizing that it was not the grandeur of the healing that had made a difference, but the quiet love that Jesus extended to each person. His actions, though small and simple, had the power to transform. As they neared the end of their journey through the forest, the group came upon a small child sitting alone, abandoned and crying. The child looked up in fear as the disciples approached, but Jesus walked toward the child with calm steps. He knelt down beside the child, offering no words, but simply holding out his hand. The child, sensing the warmth and kindness in Jesus' touch, stopped crying and placed their hand in. Jesus lifted the child gently, offering them comfort and care without saying a word. The disciples watched this quiet exchange, realizing that sometimes it is not words that heal but simply presence. Jesus had left a lasting imprint on their hearts, a reminder that the most profound moments in life often come in silence, when we simply offer ourselves to others. As the group made their way back to the city, the disciples reflected on all they had experienced. They had witnessed healing, compassion, and quiet strength. They had learned that true love and peace were not found in loud proclamations, but in simple, everyday acts of kindness and care. As they gathered around Jesus one last time, he looked at them with deep affection. The world may ask for noise, for grand gestures, but true change happens in the quiet moments. It is in the silence that you will find your strength, your compassion, and your connection to God. His words, though few, carried the weight of everything they had experienced. The disciples, forever changed, knew that they would carry these lessons with them for the rest of their lives. And though the world around them would continue to be loud and chaotic, they would always remember the quiet footsteps of Jesus, leading them toward peace. This is end of the story. Comment Amen if you believe in Jesus' blessings. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.